Welcome to MMA Fancast. My name is Luke Pace, and welcome back to everyone who's already a subscriber to the YouTube channel. If you're not already a subscriber, please subscribe so you can see more great interviews, including the one coming at you right now, about ready to make his professional MMA debut for 247 Fighting Championships Brawl in the Burgh 21 on April 20th at the fantastic Hollywood Casino at the Meadows. Miguel Deku Francisco. Welcome to
Hey,
the show.
thanks again for having me.
Always great having you on the show. It's a special thing for me, having done MMA Fancast now for a few years, to be able to see somebody like you, who I had on the show as an amateur, and followed the career, and now here you are making your pro debut. That's kind of the idea of MMA Fancast, to give up and coming both amateur, pro, and then hopefully eventually follow you and others all the way up. You're a good buddy of Lucas the Sniper Seabird. He looks like a guy that I could be following all the way up to the bigs and all of those type things. So it is really cool to be able to kind of see your development, primarily out of stout jiu-jitsu, but you also get all over the place as far as your training. So let's just jump into it. We're under a month. How did this whole debut come together? You're coming off an MMA title win. And closed out your career with a 5-3 record. Really have looked really dominant in those wins. So how was this the right time, and how did this fight come together for your pro debut?
Yeah, so I heard from 247 that that there's going to be an April card, April 20th. There's going to be a card in my hometown in Washington, and I absolutely wanted to get on that because ever since I was a little kid, I wanted to make my professional debut in my hometown. So I got the permission from my coaches that's a good idea to make my pro debut in April. So we went and we tried to get an opponent. It's been hard getting an opponent, but there was a guy that we heard about that I saw in Virginia that just fought maybe about a month ago for a Rocket Combat Sports. He fought one of my friends that I trained with whenever I go visit in Virginia with my wife, because that's where she's from. Anyway, he fought a guy named Dustin Stanley, and it ended up being a no contest, and it didn't look like any of them got injured. So I messaged 247. I said, it looks like he looks like he was still wanted to get a fight going, but it ended up being a no contest. Try to see if you can get a hold of him, if we can, and if they accept, we can get it going. And he ended up accepting the fight. Unfortunately, it was too close in between for him to accept the fight at 135, so we're fighting at 140. But
Okay.
I'm just at the point at this time in my career that I'm just happy to get a fight, because it took such a long time to even get a fight for this pro debut. So just grateful that he accepted the fight.
Yeah, I appreciate the background of that. We've had that happen a couple times. The legendary matchmaker Jim Mooney has said it. MMA is a pretty tight network. So sometimes he puts fights together. Obviously, that's his job as matchmaker. But a lot of times, fighters sometimes very politely call each other out. Like, you're a polite guy. Like, hey, there's an opportunity for both of us. That's what people sometimes miss, is that in the world of MMA, an MMA fight is really an opportunity for both fighters. Sometimes, of course, when you think of it, Conor McGregor and some of the higher ends, they really sell the beef side of things, but really it's an opportunity. It's more of a collaboration than it is really animosity. So I have reached out to Dustin Stanley. I would love to have him on the show to talk about, because it must be frustrating to get a no contest in what was his pro debut. But this is your pro debut, 140. We've seen you fight at 35 primarily, and I think once or twice at 45. A catch weight for a pro debut, to me, makes a lot of sense, because you're just 5 pounds off 35. So it's, for your next fight, you're kind of already shown that you can do it. What do you want to see out of yourself in this pro debut? And as a follow-up question, what aspects of the professional level are you looking forward to most? The 5-minute rounds, the advanced rule set, the fact that it's your permanent record, the fact that you can use elbows and head kicks, and all types of things. Like, what are you looking forward to the most? One, what do you expect out of yourself? And two, what aspect of the bigger rule set do you think will be best for you?
Kind of an answer to both questions is I'm just excited for it to be 5 minutes so that I can be more not rushed. Because there are sometimes I know 3 minutes still feels like a long time when you're in there, But when you look back at the fights, it does feel kind of rushed because everything kind of is just a blur. But after you look back at it, you're like, oh man, that really went by really quick. And I'm sure it'll still go by not as quick, but I'm sure it'll give me more time to be able to get my game plan going, be situated. I don't have to rush. So I'd say, in my opinion, the best thing that I'm looking forward to is those 5 minute rounds. Obviously, I am excited for head kicks, elbows, and knees, but I've been drilling that even whenever I was in camp for my amateur fights, just because the end goal is, as a fight as a professional. So I always had that in the back of my head, back of my game. So that was always there. Was glad that I get to use it in competition.
Right. And that's actually really smart for people out there. I always recommend, I mean, some amateurs will train pro rules the whole time, which can be helpful. At the minimum, I think if you're a novice amateur, training novice amateur and advanced amateur rules is a good idea. Like always train at least one level up. So that way, that way the skills don't feel foreign to you when you advance to that. So obviously you're trained by some of the best. Talk a little bit about your stout as your primary training, and then you had told me, and it's known that you also try to get out to Arizona for the lab MMA as much as possible. Talk a little about both of those gyms and kind of what the training has been doing for you.
Yeah, so I work an overnight job, so pretty much the only time I'm awake is when I'm training or working. And whenever I'm training, usually I'll have a morning session or an evening session and training at Stout. And then if I'm not at Stout, I'll have like either a session helping me out at the mat factory or with Philip Amaris at the Taekwondo Amaris studio. And I usually just go between those two places. And obviously, I'll have the Hurt Locker as well for my strength and conditioning. And and whenever Craig fought in February, I was working with him a lot at the academy, so I always go there just in case I need some extra work as well to get some different mindsets going into the fight. Um, as for the lab, I usually try to go there as much as I can, being that it's kind of expensive being across the other side of the country, but
Yeah.
I try my best to get there as much as I can. I'm gonna try to be there towards the tail end of my camp for this one, because they help me a lot and they treat me like family there too. So I'm definitely gonna try to be there as much as I can because the end goal is to be the top in the world, and as of right now, the top 35ers from that gym. So Sean O'Malley. So I want to be training with the best to be the best.
And given, of course, and given that connection with Sean O'Malley being there, your training there, is kind of on and off because you're based out of Pittsburgh. How often do you train with him? And it wouldn't shock me if you don't train with him at all, given the fact that he's a champ and has kind of his own, maybe kind of maybe his own closed sparring. So completely understand if you don't. But have you gotten to see him or done anything specifically with him, or who are your main people out there while you're out there?
Yeah, so I personally didn't get to train with him. I only saw him one time when they were taking team pictures. I'm sure since he was in the camp for Cheeto, he was kind of more closed off, so nobody would, rat and try to like tell anybody his game plan. But whenever I'm over there, I work with a lot of the 35ers, the 25ers, and the 45ers. A lot of the time when I was there, I was working with undefeated pro fighter Antoine Ho. I was working with him a lot. He's a really good fighter. Most of his wins are by finish. I was working a lot with another big level pro, Abdul Kamara. I was working with him a lot. It's just there. That gym is just it's all high level people. Ben Henderson's always in there. Marcus McGee, Mario Batista. There's all a bunch of just high level UFC fighters there that are all still ranked right now, and it's just a good opportunity to be able to be over there now that I can. So I try to be there as much as I possibly can.
Makes perfect sense. You have really a reputation of being probably one of the better representations of what Pittsburgh MMA is because you've trained. You mentioned the academy, obviously stout, pretty much any of the local as your primary, but pretty much any of the local gyms. And so it feels like there's a whole lot of Pittsburgh love behind you. Of course, you're making your pro debut in your hometown. It's technically Cannonsburg, but it's basically Washington as far as the casino goes. That's a super hometown. So as you reflect back, because you are no longer an amateur fighter, what do you think have been maybe the biggest things that stand out to your amateur career, whether it be something you learned, an experience, an accomplishment, like, and I'll probably ask this again when you're 5 fights into your pro career, because it's kind of hard to have some perspective. But given the fact that your amateur career is over, what is the perspective you have of what your amateur career has meant, and what you're kind of taking away from it?
Honestly, for my amateur career, the biggest takeaway that I had was that I tried my best to fight the toughest people in this multiple divisions, because I fought at both 35 and
Yeah.
40. And I always tried to take the hardest fights possible, because you want to take the hardest fights as an amateur so that you're ready for the professional divisions. And I learned a lot from my losses, so I'd say that's a positive as well. Even though you never want to lose, I'd
Mhm.
say learn more in your losses than your wins. And I also learned, whenever you do win, you have to treat it like you lost, so that you can accept the critiques that you have. Because even if you win the fight, there's still going to be things that you need to work on. So I learned that no matter what the decision is, whether it's a win, a loss, or a draw, no contest, there's always got to be things that you want to look back and criticize yourself for, because whenever you want to be the best, you have to be the best. You have to always be criticizing yourself, looking at things that you need to fix, and you just got to be hard on yourself.
Yeah, I think that really does make the most sense. It's you got to kind of be careful, and that's where the coaches come in, so that you don't beat yourself up too much, and so it doesn't become kind of an emotionally defeating process where you think you'll never get better. But there is kind of that healthy that healthy mindset that comes after a loss. And I think we've seen how valuable it is, a 5-3 amateur record when you fought really high level people, and you've taken fights at different weight classes and pushed yourself, fought for a couple different belts. I think that means more than a 5-0 record. As much as everybody won a 5-0 record before they got pro, the fact that you have 3 losses, those are areas that you've learned, and it meant that you were really pushing to kind of advance your career and your experience as much as possible. Let's get to your prediction. Would you like to make a prediction for your pro debut? You're going to have a lot of hometown people there in front of you. How do you see this fight? What way do you see this fight going?
I'm obviously, there's always a way to aim for the finish, but I do see that I'm gonna have a finish in this fight. But I'm gonna be drilling, I'm gonna be practicing, and I'm gonna try to make that my best and make it a reality. So we're gonna be ready to go.
Well, that is how you always are when you step inside the cage. And I'm sure the time you're back in the 247 Fighting Championship cage for your professional MMA debut at Brawl in the Burgh 21 on April 20th will be absolutely fantastic. A good reminder to let everybody know to get tickets either directly from you, or 247fighting.com, and give you credit, or if they're from any of your friends outside of the Pittsburgh area, since you have traveled all over. All across the country. Great opportunity for them to also get the 247 Live app in their app store, and then either get the pay-per-view through there, give you credit, or even get the year subscription to get every pay-per-view for the entire year, plus the entire backlog of catalog of fights. Always an honor having you on the show. Thanks so much for taking time out of your busy schedule. Under a month now, April 20th will be here before we know it. Can't wait to see you make your debut. This has been Luke Basin with MMA Fancast and Miguel Deku Francisco. Thanks so much for coming on.
Thanks again for having me.
You got it, brother.